Hello world, welcome to the Be Free Show, a show that brings hope to the hopeless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our video. Before we speak on today's topic, I do want to surprise you with my new book called Ruby's Elephant Flies. It's the first issue and it's available to you on Amazon. Enjoy it as an ebook and or hard copy. This book is about health, and what greater gift than to leave a legacy of health to a child? After all, health is wealth. Now today's guest is the founder and pastor of Living Word Family Church since 1998. He has a heart for people and a special love for the orphans, lost, and less fortunate. He shows this by his many mission trips around the world. His church is known for their I Love My Community outreach and disaster relief events. He is the father of his 3 beautiful children and husband to his loving wife, Maria Foslien. He is not only the founder of Living Word Family Church, but he is also my pastor. Welcome today, Pastor Paul Foslien. Thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. The sole reason why I actually created the Be Free Show is because I have a heart for those who are going through depression and have thoughts of suicide. So when I seen your videos, I said I must have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here. I think this is going to really help a lot of people who are going through depression. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, you started off on part 1 with my favorite scripture. It's from the book of John, of course. Above all things, I wish for you to prosper and be in good health. And so you spoke about having a healthy soul. You said your soul is the gateway to everything else. Everything gets filtered through that. Yeah. Can you explain this to our listeners?
Yeah, you know, the Bible talks about the soul in 2 aspects. The soul is your mind, your will, and emotions. Mm-hmm. And there's also, when we say your soul, it's just kind of the center of man, you know, where your conscience and things are kind of where you should live out of and live by. But when it says prosper, even as your soul prospers, that's really dealing with your mental capacities and growing in that area and having a healthy soul, because the Bible's everything that goes inside of us has to first go through our thought process. Mm-hmm. So if our thought process isn't healthy, then everything going into us won't be healthy. And that's why it's so important that we filter, you know, what we hear or feel, and that we have a healthy soul.
Yes, I agree with that so much. You know, what you put into your ear gates and what you hear, right, what you say, what you look at, that's all, you know, very important, because it can actually defile the soul and make it dark. So when you say they have to be careful about what you see and hear and say.
Absolutely.
Very good. You also talk about how there's many levels of depression, and I like the way you actually broke it down. You said it's like having a cold or a flu, allergies. Can you expound on this, and can you talk about what is depression?
One of the things a friend told me was that many times depression is unresolved anger. Things that we've kept inside and we let it build, and it begins to have, of course, negative effects. But there are levels of depression, you know, that you see. You know, some people have very severe depression. They don't want to get out of bed. At times, we probably all suffer from a little bit of it when we just get real discouraged or down. You know, maybe it's not medically type, you need, you know, medicine or something for it, but we can all deal with that heaviness and the weight, and that's why we kind of say it's different levels of depression.
Right, right. Thank you so much for explaining that. Now, this is what I call my love quote, because when you said it, I said I have to share this with everyone who's listening. You said, your loyalty to your future must be greater than your loyalty to your past. I'm going to say that again. Your loyalty to your future must be greater than your loyalty to your past. Now, people who are usually hurting, they love to hold on to some of those hurts and pains and problems. Why do you think they like to be married to it? And tell them the importance of, like, you know, being more loyal to your future than your past.
You know, if you aren't more loyal to where you want to go, you will perpetually be stuck living in the past.
Right.
And I think when you say married, and I like those words you use, is that people have become so accustomed to the hurts that they carry day after day, week after week, that becomes their identity. And sometimes they don't know, you get rid of that, how do I act? it's almost like it becomes such a part of them that they don't want to get rid of it. So they stay more loyal to their past than can really see being free. And it's kind of a weird thing, but you know, people just will stick to that. It's what they know, and I don't know how I can say it, but it's almost like they get joy or fulfillment when people are constantly recognizing the negativity in their life.
Right. Seems like it's comfort for them. They're so used to it. It's like, stay in my pocket and travel with me wherever I go.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we really want to change these numbers, and that's why we're here, because the numbers were astounding to me when you shared it on the video, and I listened to all 8 videos. Some of them I went through them like twice because it was that good. And you're welcome. And you mentioned how the number of patients diagnosed with depression increases each year by 20%. So when you said that, I said, let me go back and see like what the number is now. So this was in 2015, you mentioned this on those videos, and now it's 2017. We're in the end of 2017. Now your number said 121 million people around the world currently suffer from depression. And today it shows that globally, more than 300 million people of all ages suffer from depression. So that's very, very astounding, and the numbers are accurate. Really sad to know, though. And actually, you also mentioned 18.8 million Americans are affected by depressive disorders. Depression is a mental and spiritual battle that affects 1 in 10 Americans. And that's back in 2015 once again, and now the numbers are 1 out of 5 in 2017, according to the World Health Organization, which is a very credible site.
Right.
I was very just saddened by those numbers, and so that's why we're here today to make a change. Each generation by 3% will most likely be more depressed than the last generation. Because of the pressures of life and the things we deal with today. You mentioned how 100 years ago things were so much more different, and you mentioned how, you know, there was sunrise and you wake up, you farmed, and you mentioned that, and at sunset you go to bed. But now today we have so much distractions. Can you talk about today's distractions and also the past, how that was?
Well, you stop and think about God's creation. It was simple. Mm-hmm. Life revolved around sun up and sun down.
Right.
You know, and work did. And so now you have work 24 hours a day, stores open, you have constant contact with internet. It's just life never stops and it never slows down. Mm-hmm. And that is why, you know, in our lives, and I don't remember the actual year, you know, when those numbers. Yeah. But it isn't getting any better. There's a rehab center here in Naples, and they said that the average person, I think it was, I can't remember, God, I wish I could remember the date, but depression would set in their 30s usually if it was going to happen. Now it can start as early as 14.
Wow.
And so, you know, we live in a different day, different world, but we're exposed to so much, and there's so much more pressure that it's transferring on to even the kids. And so we don't have the simplicity like they, you know, 100 years ago had. And so that's why the constant depression is getting more and more and more in people's lives.
Yes, and that's interesting you said that, because just with the studies with the World Health Organization, they mentioned how the numbers of depression and suicidal thoughts are actually between the age of 14 and 29. So it's really amazing how you mentioned that. And I want people to know that God comforts the downcast, and that's something that you mentioned. Right. He comforts the downcast. When it comes to any form of depression, emotional, psychological problems, and addictions, there are always 3 common traits. You mentioned alienation, emotional isolation, unhealthy relationships, or unhealthy connections, but you said there is a way out. Can you tell the people what is the way out from that?
It's like most things, you know, the Bible says, you know, you really become, you can always tell a person by the people they hang around. Mm-hmm. And the only way you're going to get free is you got to be around people that are healthy. Right. And so many times, though, misery loves company. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be around people with the same way, feel the same hurts, to talk about it. And again, it's that you're getting an emotional need met, but in a very unhealthy way. Right. It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
And so the only way that I've seen in life, not just with depression, but just to be healthy, is you have to change your associations and who you're around and take a look at that at least and say, you know, what is causing some of this that I need to walk away from, or who or what situation.
Right. I believe that so much because bad company corrupts good character.
That's what the Bible says.
Yes. So you have to change your company. These are signs and symptoms of depression. So if you have a few of these things that I'm going to list, well, there's plenty that he mentioned. So I really advise you to go to the website napleschurch.com and look at the service archives because it's really amazing, and just go to rock bottom and look at these videos because it will really change your life. Just some of them that were mentioned was for signs and symptoms of depression is you don't want to get out of bed. Now, you mentioned that's most teenagers, that's true, but that's some adults too. So you usually do not want to get out of bed, you isolate yourself and don't want to talk to people.
Yeah.
You're persistently sad and anxious and empty feeling. There's feeling of hopelessness or pessimism, feeling of irritability and restlessness, decrease in energy, fatigue, loss of interest in activities you used to like, including sex, difficulty in concentrating, making decisions, insomnia, excessive sleeping, overeating, undereating, suicide, aches, pains in body, it goes on and on. And this is very key too, digestive problems that does not ease with treatment. Do not ignore these signs. You know, becoming numb and people drain you because you have no reserve, so people drain you easily.
Yeah.
You become cynical and you sleep, and even when you sleep and have time off, it seems like it didn't refill you. So look at those signs and symptoms and do not ignore it. Just really examine yourself. So you mentioned how some people self-medicate with work, drugs, foods, etc., and they keep shoving it until it resurfaces. Can you just let us know, like, how does it resurface?
You know, anything it's kind of like a Coke bottle. You know, remember the old glass Coke bottles? You could shake them up. And,
yes.
You know, and eventually, you know, if you shake so much, or once you pop, it's going to explode. The way humans are is that when we constantly hold it in and shove it down, at some point something's going to set it off and it's going to come spilling out.
Right.
And I know when my stepfather died, that because I couldn't be the son, I had to be the pastor for my family and just always be there. I couldn't grieve and I couldn't deal with it. And so I just had to constantly put it down because I couldn't handle my emotions and do everything else. But eventually, you know, the time came where it had to come out. And that's what happens. It's going to come out, you know, eventually.
Yeah.
And it can come out many different ways. People can anger, you know, they can come out being sad. You know, you don't know how certain people it's going to respond to it.
Wow. So do not shove it down. Do not just, because one day it will just implode. You know, what you try to keep in the darkness is just going to come out into the light. Which takes me into, you mentioned James 1:17. This is another like love quote that's like a tweetable moment. It has to be written down. So if like I write a book, which I do plan to, I'm going to have this quote that you wrote in the book and put your name on it. Because you wrote on here, God works in the light. Satan works in the darkness.
Right.
The shadows of love. Well, let's repeat that. God works in the light. Satan works in the darkness. He works in the shadows.
Yep.
And you spoke about how when you suppress something on the inside, that keeps it in the dark. And God cannot work in the dark because He works in the light. He's the Father of lights. Can you just expound on that too? That was very good.
Well, the Bible says the entrance of thy word brings light. And Satan does work in the darkness. And so one of his best tools and what people do is they have that internal conversation and they keep everything inside and they go over and over and over and over and over. And that's where the enemy comes in then and begins to lie, put thoughts in. And what happens is that until you get it out and bring it into the light, people don't deal with it. And you have to bring it out into the light, you know, because that's where God lives. But you ever notice with things going on in people's lives, they always want to hide it. You always know something's wrong when they're trying to hide it. And that's where Satan works. He works in the darkness. And that's, and until you're willing to confront it and they say, hey, I got this problem, I'm dealing with it. And until you're willing to go and get help, God can't do anything until that point happens.
Right.
It's why the Bible says it's the great confession.
It's the great confession.
It's got to come out.
It is the great confession, which I'm going right into right now. You confess, and there is freedom. And you mentioned how it's okay to get help, and understanding makes you free, and who the Son makes free is free indeed.
That's right.
So you told your story about, you know, how you actually had to just, you know, pretty much put on that pastor's hat and just pretty much cover it up, and, you know, and one day it just explodes. So I just really, you know, stress to anyone who's watching to just confess, because it really does bring freedom to your soul. You mentioned how your mind, body, soul, and spirit has to be in sync. It has to be in harmony. And most people neglect the soul because they can't see it. I've never heard anyone say that, but they can't see it.
Yeah.
So I know I mentioned some things about the signs and symptoms of depression, but what ways can a person just examine their soul so everything can be in sync and be in harmony?
You know, I think sometimes, let's go back to one of your one of your thoughts earlier, is associations.
Yeah.
You know, for those of you that are watching, you know, I dealt with depression, you know, and it came up in my life. I never thought I'd ever deal with something like that, but series of events with my dad dying, church events, my son went through depression, and all these things built up, and it came to the point to where what was inside, I was acting it out, but I didn't see it.
Right.
And I think what happens is that we need people in our lives that, what's the saying, you don't see the forest for the trees, or how does that go? When you're in it, you don't see it.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to have safe people around and healthy people around you, because if they can, you know, you don't always see it, and you don't even realize your thinking and different things is even off, but that's why you got to have great people around you that can identify that and say, hey, what's going on? Something's wrong. This isn't you. And the way you're thinking, the way you're responding, the way you're talking, and so, but because you can't see it, it's hard to grasp it.
Right, right. That was so good. You know, not only having great people around who can see it for you, but also having, you said it's okay to go to a professional. It is okay.
Yes.
You know, to go to a professional, and it's okay about, you mentioned about the medications too, like God made doctors and He gave them wisdom and the knowledge for, you know, to have, where it's okay to take medications. I think some people, they just believe, oh, you know, that's the devil, you shouldn't have medications. But no, just please take that so you can get better. It's truly not. Talking about that, when it comes to depression, some people say, oh, that's just a spirit. What is it really?
You know, I think it can be, but I think that's the easy way out. You know, because of the fall of man, you know, I kind of, early on, I came from that thought of, you can just, it's Satan, don't go, you know, psychologists are the devil, and you can get free. It's easy to say that until you walk it.
Right.
And you go through it.
Right.
And so when it came to the time to where I'm praying and I'm not getting free, I'm pastoring and I'm not getting free, and I'm feeling all these things, you know, and then I almost run somebody out the road. Remember, it's going to come out, and so it came out in anger, and my wife said, that's it, something's wrong. You know, in a lot of depression, you know, and again, a lot of the stats and the research that I put in here are from, you know, having to study and go through this all on my own. You know, and a lot of times I've had people in my life, oh, just pray more, read more. And realizing, one of my minister friends who went through depression, you know, it is true that 40% of it is psychological. It's not psychological, it's biological. It's almost, it kind of runs in the family. It's part of life. And when he said that, I'm going, my mom had it.
Wow.
My sister. And all of a sudden I started seeing that, you know, 40% of the time, many times it's because of the fall of man. You know, it's not Satan. We're living a sin-cursed world. And so I realized I had to do more than what I knew. And that went against the grain of my theology. And so when I got the freedom from a friend of mine to say, you need to go get help. I'm like, can I do that? Even all these years in ministry, it's, you know, again, the entrance of thy word, I got it out. Someone spoke into my life. Right. And that produced a freedom in me to give me the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to be okay. Other people have gone through this.
Right.
And when my friend said, you know, I've helped 25 other pastors this year get on medicine.
Wow.
I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not weird and I'm not abnormal. It's something, a stage of life I need to get help. And so I went and I got on medicine. And it was the medicine that I took and believe in God, but it's what helped get my levels right. And then all of a sudden I could get right back to where I was in my walk of God, in my walk of faith, but I could not, I needed it. And there's nothing wrong. You're not a faith failure, you know, or you're not bad because you take medicine as a Christian, because anything good is of God.
Right.
You know, and God gave man doctors.
Exactly.
Because he knows that not everybody's going to be able to receive and believe, but he wants us healthy. So he'll use any means to get us healthy, and I needed that.
Right. Thank God for all of our doctors, who are listening, because you have saved so many people's lives, like literally. Another way to actually, you know, control depression and just remove it is some of the things you mentioned here. Rest. Most people do not know how to rest. They're always on the go, and this is the generation that we're living in. Everything is just so fast-paced. You also mentioned to eat right, exercise, read a book, simple things like that. You know, believe there is hope. You have to believe there is hope, because the day you lose hope is the day you die, you mentioned. And I mentioned that's why when people get to that point, they commit suicide. They believe that there is no hope at all. And you have to keep something in front of you that you are hoping for. That's just so profound. If you guys can just do that, whoever is listening is just to have something in front of you that you are hoping for. And just know that it's not the end, that God can really bring you through. This is very key. Get outdoors, you mentioned. I love nature. Usually I do this on the outdoors. Well, this is our second, you know, interview ever, but I like the outdoors, but I wanted you all to hear this very clearly without any, you know, interruptions whatsoever. You said to get your eyes off yourself. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to know, is that one of the reasons why you do your mission trips, you know, just getting your eyes off yourself and just helping out others?
You know, I just, what I have seen in life is this, is that the way Satan works, it's always me, myself, and I. He always tries to get you to think it's you. And, you know, and when Jesus realized, you know, in the Bible when John the Baptist died, it said he even went away from everybody and got away for a little bit of time. But then it says he got up and came and looked out and he saw the multitudes that were following him and he had compassion. And it says that he went, you know, and helped them. And one of the healing processes that God's put in our lives, whether you're saved or not, is that when you help others, it brings healing to you. Because now you're refocusing your time, your energy off of poor me and helping others. And I just believe 100% that you got to go out, and even though you don't feel like it, you have to do that, because until you can get out of that, what they call self-talk, you're just always rehashing things. Look at it and just lay it out and get out and help somebody. It really is the way to help you stay free. And so I just always try to do that.
Yes. That's really good. I think that's one of the greatest things anyone can do. And then I'll tell you why. There's one pastor who counsels, and so he had where this was a former professional football player. He said he was so depressed. He went to the pastor and said he's so depressed because he's so used to hearing the crowd cheer for him and calling out his name and having that life. And so when he didn't have it, he really got into a deep depression. So the pastor just, you know, prescribed this. He said, I want you to take your football and go to the children's cancer ward and just go there for about 3 weeks, twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week. And he said, just, you know, sign footballs for them and just, you know, do that. And by the second week he did that, the depression completely left because of that. I mean, he met kids that actually passed away in the midst of that. So getting your problem off of yourself and just, you know, helping others, that's a really great medication right there.
It is.
That's one of the greatest ones. So do that, guys, whatever you're going through. That's a way to recovery. Okay, also you mentioned how sick emotions that are not dealt with show up in bodily symptoms. Sick emotions that are not dealt with show up in bodily symptoms. How to manage emotions and to go even when you don't want to. You actually mentioned that earlier. You said to go even when you don't want to. So I really encourage also for those who are going through just to really push yourself and go even when you don't want to. You will never be free until you are willing to let go of your past. Now, I'm mentioning this because, you know, once again, people like holding on to the past. And what I realized is you mentioned about forgiveness. Now, your forgiveness session was really amazing. I wish I can tie it all into this. But once again, you all have to listen to the archives because that's like another interview altogether. How important is forgiveness?
It's the key because forgiveness releases anger.
Right.
Forgiveness releases, you know, the yuck, the junk, and, you know, until you can forgive, you're always going to be tied to it. And that's why we say, you know, a lot of people walk around and they're still bound by hurts and anger, and they're being controlled by somebody in the grave because they're not there anymore and they might have died, but they haven't released it, and they constantly look back and blame them. Right. Until you get over that and sever that, you will never be free. Right. And that's why forgiveness is, you know, the release of, and I don't know, my wife always says it, and she says, you know, can you remember with peace? And I think when you can remember with peace, you can move on. You know, of course, you're never, I don't think, ever going to completely forget, but you can not let it control your choices. Right.
That was very good. Thank you, Maria Foslien, for saying that. Remember with peace, because somebody asks, you know, will you ever forget? Well, you can remember with peace. I like that. Yeah. I like that. I'm going to take that in stride with it. There are two primary choices in life. You said to accept conditions as they exist or accept the responsibility of changing them. Accept the responsibility of changing them. So let's do the latter part, you know. Accept the responsibility of changing it instead of just sitting in it and whining and crying about it, and then it turns to anger and bitterness and strife, and then one day a suicidal thought, and then, you know, suicide. Now, you mentioned about suicide. Someone had a question about, okay, my family member committed suicide. Will that person go to heaven?
Yeah, they will. You know, if they're a Christian, of course, and ask Jesus to be their Lord and Savior. And it's one of those, again, probably, you know, maybe in the Christian world, a controversial thing of doctrine, but, you know, in the Bible school I went to, the founder, he always told us this. He passed on 12 some years ago, but he said, you know, you can be sick in your body and, you know, and die from being sick in your body. And how many of us get a cold and we get ugly and act mean just by being sick, you know, irritable and all that. Well, you know, depression and mental, you know, and issues like that, you know, it's a sickness in the mind.
Yes.
And that's a good point. And because of that, it causes people to make choices that, you know, that aren't right. And so that is one of the reasons why you can get confused in the mind, and the devil just gets you deceived. But that doesn't mean you've denied Christ, or you know, it's just like cancer or something else. It's a sickness, and God's not going to hold that against you.
Right, right. I've never heard anyone explain it like that ever, because before it was like, oh, you know, you commit suicide, there's no hope and there's no chance of going to heaven. But I hope you heard that very clearly, that if you accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, then yes, because it's a mental illness. And I like how you compared it to cancer, you know, or any other disease being a sickness. And that's just what it is. It's a mental disorder. You know, if you had to say anything as last words as we wrap it up to those who are listening right now, to just give them some hope, what would you say to that person who's listening and say they're saying, yeah, but you know, I just really feel like giving up. Like, I heard everything you said, but life is just so hard, and the stresses of life, and you know, my wife left me, or my husband, you know, he cheated on me, or you know, I lost my business, or I had everything to the top and my world came crashing down. Like, how, and you know, what can you say to give that person some hope?
Let me say one thing before I say that, you know, get to that question. And, you know, and that is this, you know, people will say suicide's the most selfish thing somebody can do. And when I was dealing with it, and, you know, I had an experience at the church where a gentleman I met on the last service, and he was crying, and I asked how he was, and, you know, he said, you know, I'm fine, and then I get a call 2 hours later, he committed suicide. There's things like that that change your life forever. You know, when you go through situations like that, when you deal with them yourself, when your son's dealing with them. Yeah. And I just, and I remember my friend telling me, you know, if you stop and think about it, it's not necessarily, it's all about selfishness. A lot of times people do it because they feel like they're such a failure and a burden to others. Mm-hmm. And that they feel if they were out of their life, they would be better off. Wow. And so it's not so much an act of selfishness as it is they feel the other people's lives and people around them will be better off. And I think we need to realize that, you know what, that's where Satan can come in and deceive you to think that they'll be better off, but that's not true. You know, people love you, want to help you, and the thing I can say is you just have to get help. Right. You just have to get help, and people aren't doing it because we don't talk about this, mm-hmm. but the suicide rate is 2 times worse than people being murdered. Right. Mm-hmm. You know, it's way bigger than, and we make it such a huge thing about, you know, again, the murder rate and people getting shot and all that, and I get that, but we're doing nothing, mm-hmm. hardly anything to deal with mental illness. Right. And so, you know, I thought it was bad. I had to change and take a chance, and I had to go get help. And you know, I just would say, you know, don't think people would be better without you, because ultimately they won't, and they want you in your life. And so go get help. You know, just take that step and trust God and get help.
I like your story on depression. I think it's going to really help people and set some people free. Can you tell us your story of depression?
Sure. You know, my story of depression, which as we were kind of talking about earlier, I couldn't remember the words, but 40% of depression is inherited. You know, it runs in families. And as I said, my mom had it, my grandma had it, and my sister, and I can see signs. And so, being in the ministry, as I said, you know, like, oh, I'll never deal with this. But all of a sudden one day I did, and I didn't see it. You know, what happened is one day I get a picture from friends of ours from our son at Bible school, and my son sent a picture to them, and then at 1 in the morning, and they sent to us, and he had cut himself 70 times on his arm, and so that was kind of the start of my spiral down. It's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And all of a sudden, we're dealing for 1.5 years just trying to keep our son alive. My stepdad dies. We're dealing with some pretty major church issues where, you know, we just built a building and we thought we had some money, and we did. It was promised and then was taken away, and then just a whole bunch of series of events happened. And I just kept, again, that self-talk, internalizing and internalizing and internalizing it, to the point that, as I said, you know, one day I just, you know, it came out, and as I said, tried to run someone off the road. And so as I was going through that, you know, I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't figure out I kept my routine as a pastor. I'd get up every morning and pray. And I was so frustrated with life, and I would just, and then I would make mistakes and do things, and every day I'd cry out to God and ask for forgiveness, and I just could never get over it. I could never get past it. And you know, and so week after week, day after day, I'm feeling this way and feeling worse and worse and worse about myself. But at the same time, having to get up every Wednesday and Sunday and minister life to others. And so I'd have to save all my energy for that Wednesday and Sunday and preach the truth of God's Word. And I'm myself struggling with that. And so it just got to the point to where, you know, as I said, it just came out one day. It couldn't stay in anymore. And at that point, I knew there was something wrong. And so, and this is where we talked about associations. Mm-hmm. And I have two friends that, you know, I have, I don't have a saying that I learned from my two mentors. And that is this: you always have to have somebody in your life that if they say no to you, you'll listen to. Because sometimes we think we can do everything, we see everything, we know everything, you know, I can handle life. But, you know, I had to listen to him at the time because he said, you need to take 6 months off. And you need to just rest and learn and deal with this and get help. And so what I did is for 6 months, I only preached Sunday and Wednesday, and I let my staff run everything and do everything else because I had to have that mental break of pressure and the different things to be able to get free. And my doctor told me, he said this, he goes, people who take medicine will usually get like 25% better. People who go to counseling will get 25% better. But people who do both, that they will, 75% of people will be, you know, the percentage is way higher when you get help from all angles. But then if you add God to it and the Spirit of God, you know, the Bible says all things are possible. And so going through all of these, and there's plenty more, but it just built up, and I just got to that point. I realized I had to get help because I was in serious trouble. And but thank God I listened because I was able to catch it in time before it wrecked my life. You know, where I did something really stupid. You know, and that is because of my associations with people I had in my life. They saw it when I couldn't see it. Right. And that saved me, and that's why, you know, you know, I never thought I'd ever deal with it, and that's why I just say get help, because no one is exempt from the trials and the struggles of life that can come to us, and you just don't know at times what's going to really affect you and happen. And so I just really want to encourage you. You know, it's hard, even as a dad and as a pastor, and your kid don't know if he's going to be alive day after day for a year and a half. It wears on you, and you got to get help. You just do. Yes. So I did, and thank God I did. Had counseling and did the things I needed to do, and I still take a little bit of medicine today. But, you know, I've come a long ways, and thank God, you know, I figure if I got to take medicine the rest of my life to be healthy and have a good life, you know what, I'm going to do it.
Right, right.
Because why be miserable? I believe you got to do what you got to do.
Yes, yes. Because we need you here. We need you here at Living Family Word.
Living Family Word.
Living Word Family. Thank you so much, Pastor, for being so transparent. Because that's how people can relate, is when you're transparent, and that's when they know he's real. He's a real man, and he's the one that has, you know, helped me to just overcome what I'm overcoming. So is there any last words that you would like to say to those who are listening?
Yeah, you know, I just think it's important. You know, pastors are great general physicians, and you know, I had to force myself to learn what we've talked about today by reading after the experts and going through counseling with my son, and you know, and there's so many things that depression can be a very hard thing to diagnose, and I just want you to not try to self-diagnose or, you know, go to you know, if you think you're dealing with this, go to an expert and get help, and go to your doctor first, and do what you need to do to find out if you need medicine and what you might be facing, because Too many people, I think, sometimes, hey, let's go to the internet, I'll self-diagnose myself. No, go get help, find an expert, and they'll help you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for coming here. And I just want to say that if you want to hear more on topics like these, just subscribe to our YouTube channel and like it, and we will give you much more. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget to be free. Depression is known as a medical condition. It's a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. If this is you, do not wait to seek professional help. Also, tell someone you can trust, whether it's a close family member or friend who can guide you, or a church counsel who can also pray with you. If there are any thoughts of suicide, there is help. There is plenty of help. One, you can call the number on the screen. You can also call a confidant. And most of all, call on God. He is there. Be free.